So most people are losing at a game they don't even know they're playing. They wake up, they work harder, they try to be better, they white-knuckle their way through setbacks and obsess over their obstacles, and they tell themselves that this is just the fundamental nature of how life works. That struggle and stress and friction are just the unavoidable price of survival. And maybe, just maybe, if they grind long enough and get a little bit lucky, things will eventually turn around. But what if luck has absolutely nothing to do with it? What if the universe doesn't operate on random chance or chaos at all? Because if you look at the mechanics of the world through the lens we are exploring today, you start to realize there might be a very specific, invisible rulebook, and ignorance of those rules does not exempt you from their effect. So if you are listening to this right now and you are just tired of feeling like you are constantly pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill, if you feel like you are working incredibly hard but getting absolutely nowhere, then this episode is for you. Today we are going deep into an absolute classic, a book self-published way back in 1925 by a woman named Florence Scovel Shinn called The Game of Life and How to Play It. For this episode, I cross-referenced her original 1925 Gutenberg text with a modern analytical script titled Mastering the Game of Life. I also dug into her background and spiritual framework, and on top of that, I looked into some very active online communities, places like the Neville Goddard subreddit and the Living from the End subreddit, which are massive forums where people right now, a full century later, are actively sharing how these exact concepts from 1925 are literally rewriting their realities today. It really is remarkable how well her work has aged. Now, Shinn's core argument is beautifully simple, but it is highly disruptive. She states that we are taught to fight our way to the top, to battle sickness, to combat poverty. Fight, 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 but she says no. It is not a battle at all. It is a game of giving and receiving. And like any game, whether it is chess or poker or any game you can think of, you cannot play it successfully if you are completely ignorant of the laws that govern the board. You just keep losing. What really makes this unsettling is how unforgiving these laws are. According to Shinn, they operate exactly like gravity. You can choose not to believe in gravity. You can write an entire essay arguing that gravity is an unfair construct. But if you walk off the edge of a cliff, gravity does not care about your beliefs. It does not care about your moral standing or your essay. It just works. And Shinn is telling us that these spiritual and psychological laws have been working on you your entire life. Right at this very second, they are working on you. So to even begin to understand how to play, we have to look at the board itself. And here is the thing, in Shinn's framework, the game board is not the physical world outside of you. It is not the economy. It is not your workplace or your dating pool. The board is the human mind. She divides the mind into three distinct departments: the conscious, the subconscious, and the superconscious. And this architecture is basically the foundation for everything we are going to explore today. Let's start with the conscious mind, which Shinn occasionally refers to as the mortal mind or the carnal mind. Think of it as the front-end user interface. It is the part of us that processes the physical evidence of reality. It looks out at the world and sees exactly what appears to be there. The empty bank account, the scary medical diagnosis, the rejections, the limitations, all of it. The conscious mind is the reasoning mind. It gathers data through the five senses and synthesizes it. But here is the problem with that. The conscious mind completely believes that the physical data it is processing is the ultimate final truth. So if it sees poverty in front of it, it registers, well, I am poor, and it accepts that as a fixed reality, which then feeds directly into the second department, the subconscious mind. Shinn uses this great industrial era analogy for this. She says the subconscious is simply power without direction, like steam or electricity. It is basically a steam engine. You shovel coal into it, and the engine burns the coal and moves the train. It does not ask questions. The engine does not stop and ask, excuse me, is this train heading toward a beautiful destination, or are we driving straight off a broken bridge? It just burns the fuel and drives forward. And she really emphasizes that the subconscious has no power of induction, no independent reasoning. It takes everything literally. Whatever the conscious mind feels deeply or imagines clearly gets handed straight down to the subconscious like a set of blueprints. Then the subconscious goes to work, carrying out that exact image in the minutest detail. It does not filter, it does not judge, it just executes. And then we have the third layer, the superconscious mind, which Shinn refers to as the God mind within. This is the realm of perfect ideas, what she calls the divine design. So if the conscious is the UI and the subconscious is the engine, the superconscious is the cloud server, the ultimate source code. Shinn believed that every single person has a unique blueprint, a perfect pattern for their life that literally no one else can fulfill. It holds the perfect picture of your health, your wealth, your relationships, and your ultimate self-expression. But here is the tragedy. Because we are so trapped in the conscious mind, worrying, stressing, staring at the obstacles, we completely bypass that perfect blueprint. We program our subconscious with our fears instead of connecting to that perfect design. We hand the engine a map of our nightmares instead of our dreams. Now I want to stop here and really drill into this subconscious mechanism, because this is where the game is won or lost. Shinn calls the imagination the scissors of the mind. She says it is constantly cutting out the pictures we see in our heads day by day, and eventually we meet our own creations in the outer world. So let's play this out. If the subconscious is this literal steam engine, what happens when we just make a joke? Because self-deprecating humor is basically a modern love language at this point. We constantly joke about our own misery. We say things like, "I'm a disaster," or "I'm going to be broke forever," or "I'm a walking red flag," just for a laugh. But if the subconscious has no sense of humor, what is actually happening when we say that? The answer Shinn gives is honestly a little terrifying. The subconscious is this silent listener at your side, and it records everything like a photograph. It cannot tell the difference between a sarcastic joke and a sincere command. In the book, she shares this story about a woman who had a great deal of money, but she joked continually about getting ready for the poorhouse. She thought she was being clever, probably getting tons of laughs at dinner parties with that line, but her subconscious mind did not know it was a punchline. It just heard the words. It received this constant repeated image of lack and limitation, and in a few years this woman was almost completely destitute. Her subconscious went to work dismantling her wealth just to match the blueprint she had been feeding it for laughs. And then there is the darkest example in the book. There is a story about a child who used to play widow. This little girl would dress up in black clothes, wear a long sweeping black veil, and pretend to be a grieving widow. The adults thought it was adorable. But Shinn writes that the girl grew up, married a man she loved deeply, and in a short time he died. She ended up wearing that black veil for real. Now I have to be honest with you. When I first read that, it felt messed up. It borders on victim blaming, to say a woman's husband died because she played dress up as a kid. But here is what Shinn is actually arguing, and it is important to separate the mechanism from the moral judgment. She is not saying the universe punished her. She is not saying the little girl was guilty of anything. She is trying to illustrate a mechanism that is entirely devoid of morality. Think about a computer algorithm. If you accidentally leave a heavy weight on your keyboard and it presses delete on a crucial file, the computer does not say, "Oh, that was an accident, let's not delete this." It just executes the input. Shinn's point is that a deeply felt, vividly imagined scenario, like a child fully immersing herself in the heavy emotion of being a widow, acts as an incredibly powerful line of code. It is not about blame. It is about the terrifying neutrality of the subconscious, and that should make you pause. Because if you are constantly imagining the worst case scenario at work, or vividly picturing your relationship failing, just so you will not be caught off guard if it happens, you are doing the exact same thing. You are literally handing the scissors of your mind a blueprint for disaster. You think you are protecting yourself by anticipating the worst, but Shinn is saying you are actively constructing the worst. And you are doing it with emotion, which is the exact fuel the subconscious needs to operate. Shinn explicitly writes that whatever a person feels deeply or imagines clearly is impressed upon the subconscious. The emotion acts as the catalyst, so when you go into an anxiety spiral, your heart rate goes up, your palms sweat, you feel this intense sense of dread. You are giving the subconscious a highly detailed, emotionally charged command, and it receives that and says, okay, understood. The user wants more situations that produce this panicked feeling. Deliver. It is just fulfilling the order, which connects perfectly to the next major rule of the game. If our thoughts and mental images shape our reality, our speech acts as the ultimate seal, the spoken word. Shinn was absolutely uncompromising about this. She taught that your mouth is quite literally a magic wand. She did not see words as just a tool to communicate ideas from one person to another. She viewed words as physical, creative forces. When you say something out loud, you are staking a claim in reality. You are issuing a direct, audible command to the universe. And people do this accidentally every single day. Someone casually says, I never catch a break. Or, I am so exhausted, my life is a mess. Or, this kind of bad luck always happens to me. And they genuinely think they are just describing their current reality. They think they are reporting the news of their life. But Shinn is saying they are not reporting the news. They are writing the script for tomorrow's news. You can see this literal programming play out in the streetcar example she gives in the book. There was a man who constantly repeated, I always miss a car. It invariably pulls out just as I arrive. He affirmed it every single day. And he had a daughter who operated completely differently. Her repeated phrase was, I always catch my car. It is sure to come just as I get there. And Shinn observed them for years. For years, the man always missed his car, and the daughter always caught hers. Each of them had created a separate, unbreakable law for themselves. One established a law of constant failure and minor frustration. The other established a law of constant success and perfect timing. Think about the modern equivalent of that. I want to challenge you right now. Think about what you actually said out loud today. Not what you thought in your head, not what you wrote in your private journal, but what you actually spoke into the air. If you said, I don't know how I am going to get through this week, your subconscious receives that as a literal directive. It hears, initiate not getting through this week protocols, deliver more overwhelming situations. You are commanding the universe to bury you, which leads us to a fascinating intersection in her work, superstitions. Because if your words and beliefs create your reality, what is the deal with lucky charms? Shinn tells a story about two businessmen in her class who were wildly successful. Everything they touched turned to gold, and then suddenly everything goes to smash. Their business completely tanks. So they go to Shinn in a panic to figure out why the game is suddenly going against them. She finds out they had bought these things called lucky monkeys, some kind of carved figurine or little trinket, and right after buying them, their success vanished. Shinn diagnoses the problem instantly. She tells them that they have transferred their faith from the infinite power of the universe to these little wooden statues. They started trusting the monkeys instead of trusting the universal laws and their own divine connection. By giving their power to an external object, they introduce vulnerability, because what happens if you lose the monkey? Your power breaks with it. So she told them to throw the monkeys down a coal hole, and as soon as they did that and realigned their faith with the one infinite power, their business fully recovered. But here is where it gets interesting. Right after that story in the text, she tells another one that seems to completely contradict it. A woman is in deep despair, no money, no hope. She is crossing the street, and she finds a horseshoe on the ground. And suddenly she is filled with this intense joy. Her entire mood shifts, and she goes on to make what Shinn calls a demonstration, which is her term for a successful manifestation. So why is the monkey bad but the horseshoe is good? They are both just objects. It all comes down to where the internal authority is placed. The horseshoe itself had zero magic power. The iron did not bend reality, but the woman did not believe the metal object was saving her. She believed that the universe had sent her the horseshoe as a direct sign to keep up her courage. The horseshoe sparked her own internal faith. The two men were depending on the monkeys themselves to generate the luck. The woman used the horseshoe as a psychological trigger to reconnect with her own inner power. If you have a lucky pair of socks you wear to a job interview, and you genuinely think the cotton fabric is what convinces the hiring manager to give you the job, you have completely surrendered your power to laundry. But if you wear the socks because they trigger a psychological state of confidence and alignment with your own brilliance, the power is still yours. You are using the object as a tool to program your own subconscious mind. Now, protecting that subconscious programming is a full-time job, and it means being ruthless about who you allow into your mental space and what conversations you participate in. Which brings us to what Shinn calls the old-fashioned chat. She had a friend who would call her up and say, "Do come see me," and have a fine old-fashioned chat, and Shinn just flatly refused. She explained that an old-fashioned chat essentially means sitting around for an hour, exchanging about 500 to 1,000 destructive words, gossiping about loss, discussing the terrible economy, complaining about sickness, recounting failures. Today we call that a complaint fest or trauma dumping. Going to brunch with a friend to aggressively complain about your boss for 2 hours, and Shinn's response to her friend is so sharp. She says, "I have had enough old-fashioned chats in my life. They are too expensive." Too expensive, because every time you sit around complaining, you are literally paying for it with your future. You are feeding the steam engine a highly detailed blueprint of misery. You are handing over the scissors of your mind to your grievances. This is exactly why Shinn leans so heavily into the practice of affirmation. But it is critical to understand that she did not view affirmations as toxic positivity or some superficial fake-it-till-you-make-it gimmick. For Shinn, speaking an affirmation is a deliberate, scientific act of neurological reprogramming. You are forcefully giving the steam engine a new set of instructions, but the energy underneath the words matters immensely. Because there is a huge trap people fall into here, the desperation trap. If you say an affirmation from a place of deep desperation, imagine gripping the steering wheel of your car and sobbing, "Please let me get this money. I am so broke. I am a magnet for wealth. Please let this work." Your subconscious does not hear the word wealth in that scenario. It feels the panic, and it says, "Understood." The dominant emotion is desperate lack. Deliver more situations that cause desperate lack. The universe responds to the frequency, not just the vocabulary. You have to speak with what Shinn calls a calm, grounded certainty, an authority that borders on nonchalance. There is a famous affirmation she gave to a student: "I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay." You can hear the rhythm of it. It almost sounds like a nursery rhyme. And that is intentional. Shinn explicitly states that a rhyme sinks much more easily into the subconscious mind. It bypasses the critical reasoning mind because it sounds playful, not desperate. So what happened to the student? She went around singing it aloud, keeping her energy light and expectant, and soon she received exactly that, a wonderful job that perfectly matched the description. And then another student modified it. He changed the word work to business, affirmed it, and closed a $41,000 deal that exact same afternoon after months of total stagnation, which is an absurd amount of money today, let alone in 1925. Now this naturally pushes us into territory that makes a lot of people deeply uncomfortable, especially within spiritual and self-help circles: money. In many spiritual contexts, money is heavily loaded with moral judgment. It is either glorified as a divine reward for the righteous, or it is vilified as the root of all evil and the ultimate source of unspiritual attachment. But Shinn discarded both of those frameworks completely. She taught that scarcity itself is a spiritual problem. She argued that the universe is inherently infinite. Think about nature, the sheer abundance of leaves on a tree, the grains of sand on a beach. There is no shortage of supply at the source. The only shortage that exists anywhere is in our own minds. It is our deeply ingrained belief that there is not enough to go around, that the pie is limited, and if someone else gets a slice, we have to fight and scrape for the crumbs. To Shinn, that belief in limitation is literally a spiritual blindness, a failure to recognize the infinite nature of reality, and this is governed by her law of expectancy. You receive exactly what you expect, not what you hope for. That distinction right there is the separator. You can hope to make $1 million all day long, but if deep down in your bones you expect to barely make rent on the first of the month, the subconscious mind will faithfully deliver the struggle to make rent. Hope is a wish, Expectation is a command. You have to practice radical abundance in your imagination long before the physical evidence of it ever hits your bank account. Which brings us to what might be my absolute favorite concept in the entire book, and it is a phrase I have not been able to stop thinking about: digging your ditches. She pulls this from a seemingly obscure biblical story about three kings wandering in the desert, and it perfectly encapsulates the psychology of expectation. The three kings are in the desert with their armies and their horses, and they have run entirely out of water. They are dying of thirst. They consult the prophet Elisha to ask for a miracle, and Elisha gives them a message. He says, "You shall not see wind, neither shall ye see rain, yet make this valley full of ditches." I want you to think about how utterly insane that instruction sounds to the conscious reasoning mind. You are dying of dehydration under a blazing sun. There is not a single cloud in the sky. The physical evidence says you are doomed. And the instruction is, grab a heavy shovel, go out into the baking heat, and start doing grueling physical labor to dig ditches for water that does not exist. But the psychological lesson is profound. You must prepare for the thing you have asked for, even when there is not the slightest sign of it in sight. Your physical action of preparing demonstrates active faith. It proves to the subconscious mind that you truly expect the manifestation to arrive. If you just sat there hoping for rain, you would not dig. Digging means you know the water is coming. Shinn gives a brilliant example of how to do this in real life. There was a woman looking for an apartment in New York City during a massive housing shortage. Finding a place was basically impossible. All of her friends felt terrible for her. They told her it was hopeless, that she would have to store all her furniture and go live in a hotel until things calmed down. But this woman understood the law of expectancy. She refused the old-fashioned chat. She told her friends, "Do not feel sorry for me. I am a Superman and I will get an apartment." She spoke the words out loud. She demanded the right apartment. But then came the crucial test. She was walking through a store and saw some beautiful blankets, and she thought about buying them for her new apartment. Instantly, her reasoning mind chimed in and said, "Do not buy those blankets. What if you do not get the apartment? You will have nowhere to put them. You will have wasted your money." That is the voice of "let us be realistic." But she recognized that voice as doubt, and she replied to herself, "I will dig my ditches by buying the blankets." So she bought them. She acted as though she already possessed the apartment. She prepared for it. And very shortly after, she found a perfect apartment, chosen miraculously over 200 other applicants. The blankets were her ditches. They demonstrated active, undeniable faith to her subconscious, because the universe responds to the action, not the hollow belief. Think about how this applies right now. If you ask the universe for a massive financial breakthrough, but you spend your entire evening rehearsing the exact apology you are going to give your creditors when you default on your loans, you are digging ditches for failure. You are actively preparing for the disaster. And because you are preparing for it, the disaster is what your subconscious will deliver. We see another incredible demonstration of this with the story of the man who needed a $50,000 loan for his business. It is Friday. He needs the money by Saturday at noon, or his entire business goes under. He goes to the bank, and the bankers flatly refuse him. So he comes to Shinn's office in a state of total despair and panic, and her response to him reveals so much about the mechanics of this game. She does not coddle him. She tells him, "I suppose you lost your temper while at the bank, therefore your power. You can control any situation if you first control yourself." She tells him he has to go back to the bank. Meantime, she will hold the spiritual vision of success for him. But the man is entirely trapped in his conscious mind's perception of reality. He tells her it is literally impossible. It is Friday afternoon. His train will not get him to the bank until 10 in the morning on Saturday. The bank closes at noon, and they have already given him a hard no. He says it is too late. And Shinn replies with absolute authority, "God does not need any time, and it is never too late." So the man leaves feeling sick to his stomach. But a week later, Shinn gets a letter from him. He writes that his train was delayed, so he did not even get to the bank until 11:45, exactly 15 minutes before closing time. But something had shifted in him. He walked in quietly, completely calm, completely non-resistant. He walked up to the banker and simply said, "I have come for the loan." And the bank handed over $50,000 without a single question. Think about what happened in that room. When he went the first time, he was vibrating with desperation, fear, and aggressive need. Human beings, even bank tellers, instinctively repel that kind of energy. It triggers defensive barriers. But when he walked in at 11:45, stripped of his panic, completely non-resistant and calm, he altered the entire dynamic. His internal state of expectation commanded a different response from the environment. Now let us look at the other side of this prosperity equation. We have been talking about asking for money, expecting money, digging ditches for money. But what happens when people actually get the money and then hold on to it with a death grip out of sheer terror? The hoarding mentality. Shinn's law of use is clear. Hoarding and saving money from a place of fear invariably leads to loss. Think about the signal you are sending to your subconscious when you hoard desperately. You are declaring, "There is not enough. This might be the last bit of money I ever get. I must protect it." You are vividly picturing scarcity, and as we know, the subconscious takes that picture and goes to work making it a reality. She illustrates this with the story of a very rich woman who was obsessed with buying necklaces. A friend asked her how many she owned. The woman proudly said 67, but she never wore a single one of them. She bought them and kept them meticulously wrapped in layers of tissue paper, locked away. Because this woman hoarded them and never used them, she lived in a psychological state of intense limitation. Despite her vast physical wealth, she lived like a poor person, guarding a treasure she could not enjoy, and eventually she lost the necklaces. Giving and releasing money, letting it flow out fearlessly and cheerfully, breaks the root psychology of scarcity. It signals to your subconscious that you trust the infinite bank of the universe to replenish your supply. Think about breathing. You cannot inhale a huge breath of air and then hold it forever out of paranoid fear that there will not be any oxygen left in the room. You have to exhale. You have to release it to take the next breath. Money, according to Shinn, is a current, like an electrical current or a river. It has to flow. If you dam it up out of fear, it stagnates. That concept of flow brings us into what is arguably the most challenging section of Shinn's philosophy, non-resistance and the law of forgiveness. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive rule of the game. The guiding principle she lays out is, resist not evil, and it is incredibly hard to swallow. When something bad happens, when you lose a job, when someone betrays you, when you get an unexpected bill, the hardwired human instinct is to fight it, argue with it, push back, complain. But Shinn says that resistance places man in a state of torment. She likens the state of non-resistance to water. Water is the most powerful element on earth precisely because it is perfectly non-resistant. It does not fight the rock in the middle of the river. It flows effortlessly around it, and over time it wears the rock away. She goes so far as to state that there is no actual evil to resist. Evil only comes from our vain imagination, from the belief that there are two competing powers in the universe instead of just one infinite power. When you fight a negative situation, you are giving it reality. You are feeding it your energy, and in doing so, you trap yourself inside of it. To ground this, she tells a story about a woman who was desperate for money and forced to work alongside a business partner who was incredibly negative. He constantly talked about lack, limitation, and how the business was going to fail. The woman started to catch his poverty mindset, and naturally she began to deeply resent him and blame him for her lack of success. If she had followed human instinct, she would have kept fighting him, argued with him, complained about him to others, and she would have stayed financially stuck. Instead, she realized she was resisting the situation, so she did something radical. She consciously blessed the man and affirmed the situation's success. She told herself that since there is only one power in the universe, this man must somehow be there for her prosperity. Almost immediately after she shifted her internal state and stopped fighting him, she met a woman through this very man who ended up paying her thousands of dollars for a service. And the negative man, he harmoniously moved to a distant city and completely faded out of her life. She did not have to fight him. She did not have to get him fired. She neutralized him entirely through non-resistance. She robbed him of his power to disturb her. Shinn teaches this as a mindset. Every man is a golden link in the chain of my good. If you bless your enemy, you rob him of his ammunition. His arrows are transmuted into blessings. Because when you stop fighting the obstacle, your cognitive bandwidth opens up and you can finally see the solution that the obstacle was hiding. And she offers a phrase that I genuinely think everyone should write on a sticky note and put on their bathroom mirror. Do not ask what is the matter with you. Ask who is the matter with you. Ties directly into the mind-body connection, which is a subject where Shinn was writing decades ahead of mainstream science. Long before we had clinical studies on stress hormones and cortisol, she believed that physical disease was a direct manifestation of a mind not at ease. Specifically, she pointed to resentment and unforgiveness as the most prolific causes of physical illness. She claims that continual criticism produces rheumatism because critical and inharmonious thoughts cause unnatural deposits in the blood that settle in the joints. Whether you take that as literal medical advice or as a powerful metaphor for psychosomatic illness, it points directly to the toxic physical load of holding a grudge. Your body keeps the score. She illustrates this with a striking story. A woman came to Shinn claiming she was terribly ill from eating a poisoned oyster. Shinn looked at her and essentially said, "No, the oyster was harmless. You poisoned the oyster. What is the matter with you? Who are you angry at?" And the woman breaks down and admits she had been quarreling with 19 different people. 19. She was so full of anger and disharmony that she either literally attracted the one bad oyster in the entire batch, or more like her internal toxicity, completely suppressed her immune system and caused the physical illness. As the within, so the without. Man's only enemies are within himself. And there is an even more dramatic example of this mind-body connection. An actress who developed a severe, supposedly incurable skin disease. This woman was on the verge of losing her entire career. She gets a great role, acts brilliantly, receives rave reviews, and the very next day she is fired because a jealous male co-star demanded she be let go. Naturally, she is consumed with hatred and resentment. But she had been studying this philosophy, and she realizes what this hatred will physically do to her. So she spends the night in deep meditation, aggressively sending love and forgiveness to the man who got her fired. She maintained this practice for 3 nights, bringing herself into a state of deep, genuine peace toward him. And on the 3rd day, the incurable skin disease was completely gone. By choosing love and goodwill, she fulfilled the law, and the physical manifestation of her subconscious resentment was entirely wiped out. Now let us pull back and look at the philosophical magnitude of what Shinn is proposing here. We have all heard the phrase, "What goes around comes around." That is the law of karma. You reap exactly what you sow. If you make a mistake, if you harm someone, you have to pay the toll. But Shinn introduces a higher law, which she calls the law of forgiveness or grace. She argues that true spiritual liberation is founded on this law, that you can actually be redeemed from the karmic law entirely. You do not have to endlessly suffer for your past mistakes, your bad decisions, or your negative thoughts if you can genuinely shift your emotional state, call on the law of forgiveness, and neutralize the energy of the situation. You can be under grace and not under law. Think of it like a master cheat code that wipes your slate in a video game. You do not have to run from the consequences or fight your way out of the mess you made. You just enter the code for grace. You clear your emotional cache, and the slate is wiped entirely clean. Now let us get into the actual practical mechanics of playing this game day to day. If you want to make a demonstration, if you want to manifest the new job, the influx of money, the healthy relationship, what is the exact sequence of events you need to follow? According to Shinn, the first step is to ask a right. You must speak the word out loud, demanding only what is yours by divine right. And this is the precise moment where almost everyone fails at the game. You do absolutely nothing until you get a definite lead. You wait for a hunch. You do not hustle. You do not force it. You wait. You rely on intuition, which she defines beautifully as being taught from within. It is man's unerring guide. So you demand the lead by saying something like, "Infinite Spirit, reveal to me the way. Let me know if there is anything for me to do." And then you wait for that intuitive flash. It might be a chance remark from a stranger, a random passage in a book that suddenly jumps out at you, a sudden urge to go somewhere specific. There is a story that illustrates this perfectly. A woman came to Shinn with literally her last $8 in the world. She is living in New York. She is broke, and her reasoning mind is screaming at her, stay in the city, hustle, knock on doors, find a job, make some money immediately. But Shinn asks her if she has a hunch to do anything. The woman admits rather sheepishly that she has a weird persistent hunch to just go home to her distant city, and doing so would cost exactly her last $8 in train fare. To the conscious mind, it makes absolutely zero logical sense. It is financial suicide. But Shinn tells her, never violate a hunch. So the woman does it. She spends her last dime, gets on the train, goes home, and ends up bumping into an old family friend who miraculously provides her with thousands of dollars. The hunch was the universe's GPS, guiding her to the exact coordinates where her supply was waiting. If she had listened to logic and stayed in New York to hustle and force a result, she would have missed her demonstration entirely. And this brings up a deeply critical rule about what we are actually asking for when we play this game. The law of substitution. Shinn notes that many people are desperately striving for things that do not actually belong to them in the divine design. And if they actually managed to get those things through sheer human force, it would only bring them failure and deep dissatisfaction. The most classic example of this is asking for a specific person to fall in love with you. A woman came to Shinn desperately wanting to marry a specific man, referred to in the book as AB. She pleaded with Shinn to speak the word to make AB marry her. Shinn flatly refused. She explained that trying to force a specific person to bend to your will is a violation of spiritual law. It is relying on personal will rather than universal wisdom. It is essentially metaphysical kidnapping. Instead, Shinn told her she must speak the word for the divine selection, the man who belonged to her by divine right. She told the woman, if AB is the right man, you cannot lose him. And if he is not the right man, you will receive his equivalent. And the outcome is telling. A week later, the woman comes back and admits that AB does not really seem that wonderful to her anymore. The obsession has lifted. Soon after, she meets another man who falls instantly in love with her, who says all the loving things she had always wished AB would say, and she completely loses interest in AB. The universe seamlessly substituted a right idea for a wrong one, with no loss, no sacrifice, no heartbreak involved. This is why Shinn insists that we always append our demands with a specific clause. I give thanks that this now manifests under grace in a perfect way. You never want to force a demonstration through sheer human will. She warns that anything sourced into manifestation through personal will is always ill-got and inevitably has bad success. You want the universe to deliver the money smoothly, not drop a piano on your head so you can collect the insurance payout. So what do we do when the anxiety of waiting for the manifestation becomes too heavy? When the fear creeps back in? When the bank account is still empty and we simply cannot hold on to the positive vision? Shinn provides one of her most practical and comforting tools for exactly this moment. She calls it casting the burden. When your conscious mind is in the grip of fear and panic, your vision gets incredibly cloudy. You cannot see your way out of the problem. You feel totally trapped. And Shinn says you have to take that overwhelming burden of lack or fear and verbally cast it onto the superconscious mind, where it is dissolved into its native nothingness. The story of the woman with the two pianos is the perfect illustration. This woman had a new piano being delivered to her studio, but her old piano was still there, taking up all the space. She had absolutely nowhere to put the old one, and the new one was literally on a truck on its way to her. She was in a state of absolute panic. So she cast the burden. She repeated out loud, I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. What she was doing was shifting the responsibility of solving this impossible problem from her panicked, limited mortal mind to the infinite problem-solving intelligence of her superconscious. And almost immediately after she does this, her telephone rings. It is a friend asking if she can rent the old piano. The friend sends a truck to pick it up, moments before the new one arrives. The burden was lifted the very second she stopped trying to force a human solution and surrendered it. Shinn is also very realistic about this. She notes that sometimes you have to repeat this statement over and over for hours, either silently or out loud, because the conscious mind keeps trying to steal the burden back. She compares it to winding up a spring. When you are depleted, terrified, and out of energy, you have to keep winding yourself up with spoken words. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. You say it and you say it again. You wind the crank until the spring is tight, until the vision clears, until you finally feel that physical sense of relief wash over you. That sigh of relief is the signal that the subconscious has accepted the new program. And as we pull all of these rules together, Shinn's ultimate goal for the player of this game is what she calls the square of life, the complete balanced manifestation of health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. That balance is everything. Winning the game is not just about forcing the universe to drop $1 million in your lap so you can sit on a yacht feeling utterly empty and purposeless. Perfect self-expression means finding that one specific thing you are meant to do on this earth, which feels less like exhausting labor and more like joyous play. And it is knowing that because the universe financed your entry into the world, the supply to accomplish that work is already guaranteed. Winning the game means moving through your daily life with a calm, unshakable authority. It is the profound transition from being someone who is constantly acted upon by life, a victim of circumstance, a victim of the economy, a victim of bad luck, to someone who acts. It is becoming a person who understands that their thoughts are potent creative forces, that their words are literal commands, and who has developed the discipline to hold a vision and the faith to release it without strangling it with anxiety. Which brings us right back to you, listening to this right now. This book was self-published in 1925 because traditional publishers thought the ideas were too radical. And yet, over a century later, it perfectly diagnoses our modern anxieties. We still wake up afraid. We still doom scroll. We still narrate our lives with endless complaints and indulge in old-fashioned chats over text messages. We still mistake frantic busyness and exhausting hustle for actual meaningful progress. But the research I looked at from thousands of people online right now in 2026 proves that these rules have not aged a single day. The game was never rigged against you. You just did not know the rules. You are always pulling the strings of your reality, whether you realize it or not. The invisible forces are always working. Your subconscious mind is always taking your deepest feelings and your clearest images and silently building your tomorrow out of them. Which leaves us with one final thought to sit with as this episode ends. Right now, at this very moment, your subconscious mind is open. It does not judge you. It does not analyze your past mistakes. It only executes what you feed it next. So what is the very first sentence you are going to speak out loud when this audio stops playing? Choose carefully, because you are pulling the strings.